Master the art of Stoic emotional detachment. Command power. Why emotional attachment makes you weak. Rome, 65 AD. A man sits alone in a dimly lit room. Outside, soldiers wait. Inside, silence. The Emperor Nero has already made his decision. The philosopher Seneca, once one of the most powerful men in Rome, has been accused of conspiracy. His wealth cannot save him. His influence cannot save him. His reputation cannot save him. Soon, he will be ordered to die. And yet, witnesses describe something astonishing. No panic, no begging, no emotional collapse, no desperate attempts to cling to what was being taken from him. Only calm, only composure, only acceptance. How is that possible? How can a man remain peaceful while losing everything? The answer reveals a truth most people spend their entire lives avoiding. The things that hurt us most are rarely the things we lose. They are the things we become attached to. And until you understand this, your emotions will remain vulnerable to manipulation. Your peace will remain fragile, and your life will remain controlled by forces outside yourself. Today, we're exploring one of the most powerful principles in Stoic philosophy, the art of emotional detachment. Not becoming cold, not becoming heartless, not pretending you don't care, but learning how to care without becoming controlled. Because the person who masters emotional detachment becomes extraordinarily difficult to manipulate. And by the end of this video, you'll understand why nothing has stolen more peace from humanity than unhealthy attachment. But before we continue, consider this question. What is the one thing in your life that you believe you cannot live without? Keep that answer in your mind, because later, it may completely change. The invisible chains. Most people believe freedom means being able to do whatever they want. The Stoics disagreed. To them, freedom had a completely different meaning. Freedom was not doing whatever you wanted. Freedom was no longer being controlled by what you wanted. That distinction changes everything. Look around. Most people are not free. They are emotionally owned. Owned by approval. Owned by validation. Owned by attention. Owned by relationships. Owned by fear. Owned by expectations. Owned by outcomes. Their happiness depends on external circumstances behaving exactly the way they desire. And because of this, they spend their lives anxious, because reality rarely obeys our preferences. Someone doesn't text back. The mood changes. A friend becomes distant. The mind spirals. A relationship ends. The world collapses. A stranger criticizes them. The wound lingers for weeks. Why? Because emotional dependence creates emotional vulnerability. Anything you need too desperately gains power over you. This is one of the most important ideas in Stoicism. The more attached you become, the more fragile you become. And fragility attracts suffering. Think carefully about this. Imagine two people. One person enjoys wealth, but understands it could disappear tomorrow. The other person builds their entire identity around wealth. Who suffers more when financial hardship arrives? The second person. Not because they lost more, but because they attached more. The same principle applies to relationships, careers, status, possessions, reputation, even dreams. The greater the attachment, the greater the suffering when reality refuses to cooperate. This doesn't mean you shouldn't love. It doesn't mean you shouldn't pursue goals. It doesn't mean you shouldn't care. The Stoics never taught indifference. They taught freedom. And freedom begins the moment attachment stops becoming dependency. The trap most people never see. Here is something uncomfortable. Most emotional suffering is self-created. Not intentionally, not consciously, but through attachment. Imagine someone insults you. The words enter your ears. Then what happens? Most people assume the insult caused the suffering. But Epictetus argued something revolutionary. The insult itself is not the problem. Your interpretation is. Think about it. If a stranger calls you something ridiculous that you know is false, do you suffer? Usually not. Why? Because you don't believe it. But if someone criticizes an insecurity you secretly fear may be true, suddenly it hurts. The words are not different. Your attachment is. This means emotional pain often reveals attachment. Attachment to identity. Attachment to image. Attachment to being admired. Attachment to being right. Attachment to being loved. And once you see this, something remarkable happens. You stop asking, "Why did this hurt me?" and begin asking, "What am I attached to?" That question changes lives, because every emotional wound contains a lesson. Every trigger reveals an attachment. Every emotional overreaction exposes a dependency. And the Stoics knew that awareness is the first step toward freedom. Why narcissists love attached people. There is a reason manipulators target emotionally dependent individuals, because attachment creates leverage. Imagine trying to control someone who doesn't need your approval. Difficult. Imagine manipulating someone who can comfortably walk away. Almost impossible. Imagine threatening someone whose self-worth doesn't depend on your opinion. Powerless. Manipulation requires emotional dependency. Without dependency, the manipulator loses influence. This is why narcissists often begin relationships with overwhelming attention, excessive praise, excessive validation, excessive affection. What appears to be love is often conditioning. They are teaching you to become emotionally dependent on their approval. Then, once attachment forms, the game changes. Attention becomes inconsistent. Affection becomes conditional. Validation becomes scarce. And suddenly you're chasing what was once freely given. Many people mistake this chase for love. It isn't. It is dependency. And dependency creates vulnerability. The Stoics would immediately recognize this dynamic, because they understood a timeless principle. The less desperately you need something, the less control it has over you. This applies to people, relationships, status, recognition, everything. And that is why emotional detachment is not merely philosophical, it is practical self-defense. The story of the slave who became free. Epictetus was born a slave. Think about that. A slave, owned by another human being. His body belonged to someone else. His movements could be controlled. His future could be dictated. Yet centuries later, his teachings would influence emperors, generals, scholars, and leaders around the world. Why? Because he discovered something extraordinary. A person can lose external freedom and still possess inner freedom. One day, according to historical accounts, his master twisted his leg. Epictetus calmly warned him, "You will break it." The master continued. Eventually the leg broke. Epictetus simply replied, "Did I not tell you it would break?" Imagine that level of composure. Most people explode over traffic. He remained calm while enduring physical suffering. How? Because he had mastered the distinction between external events and internal responses. The event occurred, but he refused to surrender ownership of his mind. That is emotional detachment. And that is why his teachings remain relevant nearly 2,000 years later. Attachment disguised as love. Many people confuse attachment with love. The two are not the same. Attachment says, "I need you." Love says, "I appreciate you." Attachment says, "I cannot be happy without you." Love says, "My happiness is not dependent upon you." Attachment fears loss constantly. Love accepts uncertainty. Attachment clings. Love allows. Attachment possesses. Love respects freedom. This distinction is crucial, because attachment often disguises itself as devotion. People become obsessed, consumed, dependent, and then call it love. But true love does not require emotional slavery. In fact, the healthiest relationships are often built by individuals who are emotionally detached. Not detached from caring, detached from dependency. They love deeply, but they remain whole. They remain grounded. They remain themselves. And because of this, their relationships become stronger rather than weaker. The addiction to approval. There is another attachment quietly destroying modern lives: approval. Millions wake up every morning seeking it. On social media, at work, in relationships, among friends, among strangers. They crave validation, recognition, acceptance, and because of this craving, they become easy to manipulate. The need for approval is one of the strongest forms of emotional dependence. Why? Because it places your self-worth in someone else's hands. The moment another person becomes responsible for your value, you lose power. Marcus Aurelius understood this. Despite ruling the most powerful empire on earth, he constantly reminded himself not to become attached to praise. Because praise is unstable. Today's admiration becomes tomorrow's criticism. Today's supporters become tomorrow's opponents. Public opinion changes like the weather. Building your identity upon it guarantees suffering. Yet most people do exactly that. And then wonder why they feel anxious. The Stoic solution is simple. Let your character determine your worth. Not applause, not popularity, not approval. Character. Because character remains yours, even when the crowd turns against you. The moment everything changes. There comes a moment in every person's life when reality delivers a painful lesson, a betrayal, a rejection, an abandonment, a disappointment, a loss. Something breaks, and suddenly the illusion of permanence disappears. The relationship you thought would last forever ends. The person you trusted betrays you. The future you imagined vanishes. At first, this feels devastating. But for some people, something remarkable happens. The pain awakens wisdom. They begin seeing reality differently. They realize that everything external is temporary. People change. Circumstances change. Fortunes change. Opinions change. Nothing remains fixed.